Tonight, when the sun goes down, you're going to flip a switch. The room will flood with light. But the light you see isn't what your ancestors saw. Look closely at the world around you. You take the colors for granted. You see the deep green of summer leaves. You see the vibrant red of an apple. And you see the brilliant, endless blue of a clear midday sky. But what if that blue sky wasn't actually blue to the people who built our world? In the late 1800s, a British statesman named William Gladstone noticed something deeply unsettling while reading the Odyssey. Homer, the legendary ancient Greek poet, was a master of vivid description. Yet, throughout his massive epic, he never once used the word blue. Not even once. When Homer described the vast, rolling Aegean Sea, he didn't call it blue. He called it wine dark. Think about that for a second. How does a massive body of water look like dark red wine to a master poet? Gladstone grew obsessed. He counted every single color reference in the entire book. Black was mentioned nearly 200 times. White was mentioned 100 times. Red appeared 15 times. Yellow and green made rare appearances. But blue was completely absent. Was Homer simply colorblind? Gladstone checked other ancient Greek texts. He looked at medical records, philosophical essays, and historical accounts. The result was identical. The ancient Greeks had words for light, dark, red, and yellow, but they had absolutely no word for blue. To them, the sky was often described as bronze or gleaming like iron. How do you look at the sky and see metal? A few years later, a German philologist named Lazarus Geiger decided to see if this was just a weird Greek quirk. He expanded the search globally. He analyzed the ancient Indian Vedic hymns. He translated ancient Icelandic sagas. He pored over old Chinese scrolls, early Hebrew texts, and ancient Arabic literature. The results were shocking. Across every single ancient civilization on Earth, the word for blue did not exist. Language after language followed the exact same evolutionary path. First, human languages created words for dark and light, or black and white. Next, they invented a word for red. Red is the color of blood. It is the color of fire. It is the color of danger and life. After red, languages developed words for yellow and green. Finally, at the very end of linguistic history, a word for blue would emerge. Why did blue take so long to arrive? Think about nature. Where do you actually find blue in the wild? You might say the sky or the ocean, but the sky has no physical substance. You cannot hold a piece of the sky. The ocean is just water. When you scoop it up in your hands, the blue vanishes. Apart from a rare bird feather, a fleeting butterfly wing, or a precious lapis lazuli stone, blue almost never exists as a physical object in the natural world. Flowers are rarely true blue. Animals avoid it. If a color doesn't exist in your daily, practical life, your culture doesn't need a word for it. But this raises a terrifying question. If you don't have a word for a color, can your eyes actually see it? For decades, scientists assumed that human vision was purely biological. You have cone cells in your eyes. They detect light waves. The brain processes the signals. Case closed. But in the late 20th century, researchers began to suspect that language acts as a literal lens for our biology. Enter Jules Davidoff, a psychologist who traveled to Namibia to study the Himba tribe. The Himba people are fascinating because their language has plenty of words for green, but no specific word for blue. They group both blue and green under a single linguistic umbrella. Davidoff set up a computer screen in front of the tribe members. He showed them a circle of 11 green squares and one distinctly blue square. To you and me, the blue square leaps off the screen immediately. It is glaringly obvious. But when the Himba looked at the circle, most of them couldn't spot the difference. They stared at the screen, confused. They guessed randomly. What took our eyes a fraction of a second took them minutes of intense concentration, and many failed entirely. Their physical eyes were perfectly healthy. They possessed the exact same genetic hardware as you and me. Yet, because their language lacked a boundary between blue and green, their brains physically struggled to perceive the contrast. Does this mean the ancient Greeks were literally blind to the sky? Not exactly. They could see that the sky was different from a field of grass. But without a dedicated category for blue, their brains lumped it into other buckets. It was either light, dark, or gray. But the Himba study had a second, even weirder phase. Davidoff showed them another circle of squares. This time, All 12 squares were green to a Western eye. But to the Himba, one of those green squares belonged to a slightly different linguistic subcategory of green. When Davidoff looked at the screen, the squares looked identical. But the Himba spotted the different square instantly. Their language had trained their brains to see a microscopic variation in green that is completely invisible to us. Take a moment to let that sink in. Your language is actively shaping the physical wiring of your visual cortex right now. We think we see the world exactly as it is. We view our eyes as passive cameras recording objective reality. But they aren't cameras. They are data processors. And those processors rely on the vocabulary downloaded into our minds during childhood. There was only one ancient civilization that broke the rule and developed a word for blue early: the Egyptians. Why them? Because the Egyptians were the only culture that figured out how to manufacture blue dye. They combined silica, lime, and copper to create a beautiful, synthetic pigment known as Egyptian blue. The moment they could physically produce the color, they named it. The moment they named it, it became real. What else are we missing right now? Are there colors in the sky today that we lack the words to describe? Are there subtle shifts in the texture of reality that our distant descendants will see instantly, while we walk through life completely blind to them? We are trapped inside the prison of our vocabulary. We look out at the infinite, bleeding colors of the cosmos, and we force them into the tiny, neat boxes our language allows us to see. You don't see the world with your eyes. You see it with your words.